First contact at altitude, April 17, 1943, 24,000 feet above the North Sea, east of the English coast. The cold seeps through every seam of the aircraft as the B-17F drifts forward in loose formation, for right cyclone engines hammering a steady rhythm through the aluminum skin. Frost feathers the inside of the plexiglass turret, and oxygen masks hiss softly with each breath. Somewhere below, the sea reflects pale morning light, flat and indifferent. Up here, the sky feels crowded, tense, waiting. Staff Sergeant William Red Mallory grips the handles of the waist-mounted Browning M2, his gloves stiff with cold and oil. He is 23 years old, freckled, red-haired, and already tired in a way sleep never seems to fix. The interphone crackles in his headset as the pilot calls out position checks. Mallory barely listens. His eyes scan the empty blue, not straight ahead like the manual says, but off to the side, then back again, then up toward the sun. Mallory has a reputation in the 305th Bomb Group. Some of it fair, some of it exaggerated. He fires early. He fires often. He tracks shadows that others ignore. On 2 previous missions, officers noted his ammunition expenditure with raised eyebrows. One debriefing included the word reckless. Another included wasteful. The doctrine is clear. Hold fire until enemy fighters commit. Fire short bursts. Conserve ammunition for the real attack. Mallory does not argue. He simply nods, signs the form, and goes back to cleaning his gun. The formation is 20 minutes from the coast when the first warning comes. Bandits. 3 o'clock high. The call echoes through the interphone, sharp and clipped. Mallory snaps his head right, squinting past the glare. At first he sees nothing. Then movement. Black specks sliding against the bright sky, growing fast. Focke-Wulf 190s. They come in from above and behind. Classic intercept profile. Experienced pilots. Mallory feels his stomach tighten as the specks resolve into angular wings and spinning propellers. He counts quickly. 4. No. 6. The lead German fighter rolls slightly, lining up on the tail of the bomber ahead. Tracers streak upward from another B-17 as a top turret opens fire too early, the rounds falling short. Mallory watches the German pilot adjust calmly, slipping through the flak bursts with practiced ease. Hold your fire, the interphone barks. Let them come in. Mallory does not answer. His instincts prickle the same way they did on the training range when he first learned to lead a moving target. He knows the distance. He knows the angle. More importantly, he knows how these pilots think. They expect discipline. They expect hesitation. Mallory swings the Browning upward and squeezes the trigger. The gun bucks violently, a solid mechanical thudding that travels up his arms and into his shoulders. Brass casings spill onto the floor, clattering and sliding toward the open hatch. The tracers arc out in a long, deliberate stream, not aimed at a single aircraft but spread across a slice of sky where the fighters must pass. Cease fire, waist gunner, someone shouts. Mallory keeps firing. He adjusts his aim slightly, walking the stream higher, then lower, creating a moving wall of lead. This is not textbook gunnery. It is not a neat burst aimed at a single silhouette. It is a denial pattern, a curtain that forces the enemy to react. The lead Focke-Wulf jerks suddenly, its nose pitching up as the pilot breaks formation to avoid the unexpected fire. A second fighter follows, rolling hard to the left. The carefully timed attack fractures in seconds. Mallory shifts, tracking the brake, firing shorter bursts now, snapping the gun from one angle to another. One of the German fighters flashes past the formation, too fast, too close, tracers stitching the air just behind it. Another veers off, trailing a thin line of smoke, its engine coughing unevenly. Inside the bomber, the reaction is immediate. What the hell is he doing? A voice snaps over the interphone. But no one orders Mallory to stop again. Because outside, the sky is no longer filling with converging fighters. The Germans scatter, forced wide, their approach ruined. The coordinated attack dissolves into individual passes, easier to track, easier to survive. Mallory releases the trigger, chest heaving, eyes still locked on the shifting sky. He has burned through far more ammunition than doctrine allows. His gun barrels smoke faintly in the freezing air. For a moment, there is silence except for the engines. Then the tail gunner speaks, his voice low and surprised. They broke off. Mallory swallows, flexes his fingers, and starts scanning again. He knows this is not over. He also knows that when the debrief comes, there will be questions. He does not care. Up here at 24,000 feet, doctrine is thin paper. Instinct is heavier. And the sky, for now, has gone quiet. Doctrine versus instinct. The quiet does not last. Mallory keeps his cheek close to the frozen metal of the gun mount, breathing steadily through the oxygen mask as his eyes sweep the sky again and again. He knows better than to relax. German pilots rarely disengage completely. They reposition, they wait, and they punish crews who mistake silence for safety. Inside the fuselage, the crew begins talking all at once. "You burned half your belts in one go," the radio operator mutters, not accusing, just stunned. The co-pilot's voice cuts in, tight with controlled irritation. "We told you to hold your fire." Mallory finally keys his mic. "They were already committed," he says. "They just didn't know it yet." No one responds. The bomber formation presses on toward the continent, contrails stretching like chalk lines across the pale blue sky. Below them, the North Sea gives way to darker land. Somewhere ahead are flak batteries, fighters, and a target the briefing officers described with red grease pencil and careful optimism. 5 minutes pass. Then the sun betrays them. Bandits again. 11 o'clock diving. This time Mallory sees them instantly. From Messerschmitt Bf 109s, noses down, using the sun as cover. They are coming fast, too fast for hesitation. Mallory does not wait for permission. He does not even wait to fully seat himself. He fires. The Browning roars back to life. The vibration so strong it rattles his teeth. Mallory does not aim directly at the nearest aircraft. Instead, he leads far ahead, calculating speed and closure in a fraction of a second, placing the stream where the fighter will be, not where it is. The tracers streak upward, bright and purposeful. One of the Messerschmitts snaps into a sudden roll, pulling out of its dive earlier than planned. Another breaks low, its pilot choosing distance over precision. The remaining two hesitate, their perfect geometry ruined by a gunner who refuses to behave. The tail gunner opens up now, followed by the top turret. The sky fills with intersecting fire, chaotic but effective. Mallory shifts targets again, short controlled bursts this time, forcing the fighters to maneuver instead of aim. A shout erupts over the interphone. "Hit one. He's smoking bad." Mallory catches a glimpse of it, a Bf 109 staggering, as if drunk, black smoke pouring from its engine cowling. The aircraft peels away, diving steeply toward the clouds below, fate uncertain but grim. The remaining fighters make a single rushed pass, firing wildly, then disengage. No bomber takes a direct hit. No engines fail. No men scream for medics. When the sky clears again, the tension inside the aircraft finally vents. The pilot exhales audibly. All stations check in. Each crewman answers in turn. When Mallory reports green, there is a pause before the pilot speaks again. "Next time," he says carefully, "give us a heads up before you turn the sky into a shooting gallery." Mallory almost smiles. But the reprieve is short-lived. As the bombers push deeper inland, flak begins to bloom around them. Black bursts at the sky, rocking the aircraft with concussive thumps. Shrapnel rattles against the fuselage like thrown gravel. Mallory braces himself, knees bent, absorbing each jolt. Between bursts, he watches. He notices something the others do not. The fighters are not massing anymore. They're circling wide, probing, testing. Mallory realizes why. They're waiting for the gunners to exhaust themselves, waiting for the reckless one to run dry. Mallory checks his ammunition count. He has less than half remaining. Enough, but not generous. He adjusts his strategy, firing only when necessary, using the memory of earlier engagements to predict approach vectors. Minutes later, the final attack comes. 3 Focke-Wulfs rise from below the formation, climbing aggressively, engines straining. This is a dangerous angle, exploiting blind spots. Mallory leans out, body half twisted, and fires downward, the tracers streaking into the climbing fighters. One of them flies straight through the fire. For a split second, Mallory sees the pilot's canopy flash. Then the aircraft shudders violently. Pieces shear away from the wing root. The Focke-Wulf rolls inverted and drops out of sight, falling end over end. No one speaks. The remaining 2 fighters brake hard, abandoning the climb. They do not return. The rest of the mission unfolds in a blur. Bombs away. Flak. A damaged bomber limping home. Hours later, wheels finally touch the runway back in England, tires screeching, brakes smoking. When the engines shut down, the crew sits in silence, ears ringing, hands trembling. Then someone laughs, shaky and loud. On the tarmac, intelligence officers wait with clipboards. They tally damage, losses, ammunition expenditure. One of them stops at Mallory's line. His pencil pauses. "Staff Sergeant," the officer says, looking up, "care to explain why you fired nearly twice the recommended amount?" Mallory meets his gaze, calm and steady. "Because if I hadn't," he says, "they would have fired first." The pattern that broke the attack. The debriefing room smells of stale coffee, damp wool, and cordite that no amount of washing ever quite removes. Mallory sits on a hard wooden bench with the rest of the crew, oxygen mask marks still pressed into his cheeks. Across the table, officers shuffle papers, their faces tight with the practiced neutrality of men who have already seen too many casualty lists. The intelligence officer does not argue with Mallory. He simply writes something in the margin and moves on. That would normally be the end of it. But the next morning, Mallory is summoned again. This time, it is not just his crew present. 2 other gunners from neighboring aircraft sit along the wall, curious and uneasy. At the front of the room stands Captain Howard Pierce, operations officer for the group, a former fighter pilot with a limp and a voice that carries. "We've reviewed gun camera footage," Pierce begins. "And eyewitness reports." He nods toward Mallory. "Specifically yours." The room is quiet enough to hear boots shift on the floor. Pierce flips a switch. The projector hums to life, throwing jittery black and white footage onto a hanging screen. Fighters streak across the frame, tracers rising to meet them in long arcs. The footage pauses, grainy but unmistakable. A German fighter breaks early, rolling away from an attack that never fully forms. Pierce taps the screen with a pencil. This is where standard doctrine says you should still be holding fire. He advances the film. Another break. Another aborted run. What Staff Sergeant Mallory did, Pierce continues, was force the intercept to happen on his terms. Some of the gunners lean forward now. Pierce explains it without theory or flourish. Mallory's firing pattern created uncertainty. The fighters could not predict when or where the fire would stop. Instead of aiming carefully, they maneuvered defensively. Every second spent avoiding bullets was a second not spent lining up a kill shot. And when they hesitate, Pierce says they lose the initiative. There's a murmur in the room. Mallory keeps his eyes on the floor. 2 days later, the group flies again. Same altitude, same cold, same endless sky. This time, Mallory's reputation precedes him. The tail gunner checks in early, asking where Mallory is watching. The top turret times his scans with Mallory's calls. When the first fighters appear, no one tells Mallory to hold fire. He opens up as before, measured but early, shaping the air with tracers. The enemy reacts the same way. Attacks break. Formations scatter. One fighter bursts into flame under converging fire and spirals away, a black smear against the clouds. By the time the bombers turn for home, no aircraft in Mallory's element has been lost. Word spreads quickly in a combat unit, not through memos, but through glances and nods on the flight line, through quiet questions asked over cigarettes, through gunners adjusting their timing, their spacing, their confidence. Mallory never claims credit. He never lectures. He simply explains what he sees, and when he sees it, the Germans notice too. On the next mission, the fighters come in lower and faster, attempting to overwhelm with speed rather than precision. Mallory adjusts again, firing shorter bursts, changing rhythm, refusing to become predictable. A Focke-Wulf explodes in midair when its wing root takes a concentrated burst. The shockwave ripples through the bomber formation. Cheers erupt over the interphone, raw and unfiltered. But the cost is mounting. Ammunition runs low on several aircraft. One gun jams at a critical moment. Another bomber takes hits to the wing, fuel leaking in a thin mist that catches the light. Mallory feels the edge of it now. The fine line between aggression and depletion. Between forcing the enemy back and leaving nothing for the final fight. As the formation limps home, he realizes something unsettling. His way works, but only if the timing is perfect. One mistake, one misread approach, one empty belt at the wrong moment. The sky is quiet again as England appears on the horizon. But this time, the silence feels heavier, more deliberate. Mallory stares out at it, understanding that the Germans are learning too. And the next encounter will not forgive improvisation. When the enemy adapts. June 6, 1943. Mid-morning. Over Western Germany. The airspace ahead looks deceptively calm. A pale blue bowl stretching to the horizon. The formation tightens as flak markers drift upward, lazy at first, then sharp and violent. Mallory braces himself, boots planted wide, one hand steadying the gun cradle as the aircraft shudders. This mission feels different before the first shot is fired. The Germans do not appear in scattered groups. They arrive together. Bandits. Multiple groups. High and low. Mallory's heart rate spikes. He scans quickly, counting shapes, angles, intent. Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts, at least a dozen, fanning out rather than diving straight in. They're spacing themselves carefully, overlapping fields of attack. They have studied the bombers. Mallory waits half a second longer than usual. Just enough. Then he fires. The familiar roar fills the fuselage. Tracers reach out, bright against the sky. But this time, the fighters do not break as before. They weave through the fire, splitting into pairs, one distracting, one committing. Here they come, the tail gunner shouts. The first pass is brutal. Cannon shells punch through aluminum, tearing ragged holes in a bomber two ships ahead. A wing erupts in flame. The aircraft drops out of formation, spiraling down, crew bailing out in ones and twos. Mallory forces himself to stay focused. He shifts his fire, not at the nearest fighter, but at the one lining up behind it. The second pilot does not expect it. His aircraft jolts, smoke trailing instantly. He breaks away, dragging his partner with him. Flak explodes nearby, the concussion slamming Mallory against the fuselage. His ears ring. He tastes blood where he has bitten his lip. A warning light flashes. Interphone voices overlap in panic and urgency. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Engine 3 taking hits. Waste, we're losing altitude. Mallory checks his ammunition again. Less than a quarter remains. The Germans press harder now, confident, disciplined. They fire from longer range, probing, conserving their own ammunition. Mallory realizes the truth of it in a sudden, cold clarity. They are trying to exhaust him. He changes tactics again. Instead of sustained fire, he snaps single bursts, precise and punishing, forcing last-second evasions. He times his shots with the roll of the aircraft, using the bomber's movement to widen his coverage without spending rounds. A Messerschmitt commits too deeply, its pilot greedy for a kill. Mallory waits until the fighter fills his sight, then fires a brutal, concentrated burst. The rounds tear through the cockpit. The aircraft disintegrates in a spray of debris and flame. A cheer starts, then cuts off as another fighter roars past, firing wildly. The bomber lurches. Warning lights multiply. Smoke creeps into the fuselage, acrid and choking. The pilot's voice comes through, steady but strained. We're falling out of formation. Hold them off. Mallory does not answer. He is counting seconds, counting angles, counting the weight of every remaining round. Another attack builds, 3 fighters lining up from below. Mallory opens fire, emptying the last of his main belt. The gun clicks dry at the worst possible moment. For a heartbeat, the sky seems to lean in. Then the top turret opens up, followed by the ball turret. Crossfire fills the gap Mallory has left. One of the attackers explodes. The others break. Mallory slams a fresh belt into the feed tray with numb fingers, racking the bolt just as the formation regroups around them. The fighters fade back, satisfied with the damage done. The bomber limps home hours later, riddled with holes, systems failing, crew exhausted beyond speech. On the ground, mechanics stare in disbelief at the aircraft. Officers tally losses in silence. No one questions Mallory this time. But that night, lying in his bunk, he stares at the ceiling and wonders how close instinct can come to failure before it stops being bravery and becomes luck. The sky had not gone silent today. It had screamed. The moment the sky went silent. July 12, 1943. Early afternoon. Over the Ruhr Valley. The heat inside the bomber is oppressive despite the altitude. Sweat mixes with oil and cordite, turning gloves slick. Mallory wipes his eyes with his sleeve and forces himself to breathe evenly through the oxygen mask. The memory of the last mission lingers in every vibration of the aircraft. This is the one they expect to lose planes on. Flak bursts thicken as the formation approaches the target. Black clouds bloom with frightening precision, walking toward the bombers in deliberate steps. The aircraft shudders again and again, metal groaning under the strain. Then the fighters come. Not in a rush, not in a dive. They form up at a distance, a dark line against the pale sky. Mallory counts them automatically. Too many. The interphone crackles with strain comm. All gunners stand by. Mallory knows what is coming. The Germans are setting up for a coordinated, multi-axis strike. High-low, head-on, everything at once. He does something he has never done before. He fires before they move. The Browning erupts, the sound brutal and continuous. Mallory sweeps the gun slowly, deliberately, creating a massive lattice of tracers across the space between the formations. It is not aimed to hit. It is aimed to deny. The effect is immediate. The German line wavers. Fighters peel off instinctively, pilots reacting before orders can catch up. The perfect alignment shatters. Some dive early. Others hesitate too long. Keep it up, someone shouts. Mallory does not hear him. He fires in controlled waves now, long enough to force reaction, short enough to conserve. Other gunners follow his lead without being told. The sky between the bombers and the enemy becomes hostile, unpredictable. The Germans try to push through anyway. Two fighters make it past the curtain, cannon blazing. One explodes under converging fire. The other pulls away, trailing smoke, its attack ruined. Then something strange happens. The fighters stop advancing. They circle at a distance, engines throttled back, pilots reassessing. Second stretch. Flak continues. Bombers roar forward. The sky is suddenly empty of attacking aircraft. Mallory eases off the trigger, arms trembling, barrel glowing faintly. He scans wildly, expecting another rush. It never comes. Bandits disengaging. The tailgunner says, disbelief thick in his voice. The formation reaches the target unopposed by fighters. Bombs fall cleanly, strings of explosions rippling across the industrial landscape below. The bombers turn for home, engines straining but intact. Only then does Mallory realize his hands are shaking uncontrollably. Hours later, they land in England under a low gray sky. Crews climb out slowly, exhausted, stunned. On the tarmac, intelligence officers wait again. This time, there is no irritation in their eyes, only curiosity. Captain Pierce approaches Mallory, stopping a few feet away. They broke off entirely, Pierce says quietly. Recon confirms it. Mallory nods, unsure what to say. Pierce studies him for a moment. You didn't just disrupt the attack, he continues. You convinced them it wasn't worth trying. That night, word spreads through the group. Other units begin experimenting with earlier, heavier suppressive fire. Manuals do not change overnight, but habits do. The sky becomes more dangerous for interceptors. Mallory lies awake in his bunk, listening to the distant hum of aircraft engines and the wind against the barracks. He knows this will not end the war. But for one afternoon over the Ruhr, the enemy looked at a wall of fire and chose silence instead. Aftermath and Legacy. August 3rd, 1943. Dusk settles over the airfield in eastern England, the sky bruised, purple and gray as returning bombers line up for landing. Mallory stands off to the side of the runway, helmet tucked under one arm, watching another crew touch down hard and safe. The smell of burned rubber and hot oil hangs in the air. It has been weeks since the mission over the Ruhr, and the change is subtle but unmistakable. Gunners fire earlier now, not wildly, not carelessly, but with intent. Long-range suppressive streams reach out to meet fighters before they can settle into perfect attack lines. Formations communicate more. Overlapping fields of fire are planned, not improvised. Ammunition counts are adjusted. Doctrine bends, slowly, under the weight of experience. Mallory never becomes famous. There are no newspaper photos, no citations read aloud in mess halls. His name appears only in after-action reports and marginal notes, referenced quietly by officers who now understand what happened in that sky. One afternoon, Captain Pierce calls him into the operations office. "We're updating training guidance for new gunners," Pierce says, sliding a thin folder across the desk. Inside are stills from gun camera footage, diagrams sketched in pencil, notes written in plain language. Mallory recognizes the patterns immediately. "This is what you do," Pierce says. "We want them to understand why." Mallory studies the pages for a long moment. Then he nods once. "They need to know when not to do it too," he says. Pierce smiles faintly. "Exactly." The war grinds on. Missions blur together. Faces change. Some seats in the briefing room remain empty, never to be filled again. Mallory keeps flying until his tour ends, carrying the weight of every decision he has made in the air. On his final mission, the sky is quiet from the start. A few distant fighters probe and retreat. No massed attacks form. The bombers pass through contested airspace with fewer losses than anyone would have believed possible months earlier. As the English coast comes into view, the pilot's voice breaks slightly over the interphone. "Good work today, boys." Mallory rests his hands on the silent Browning, the metal cool beneath his fingers. He looks out at the empty sky and feels a complicated mix of relief and unease. He knows that somewhere on the other side of the clouds, enemy pilots are making their own notes, their own adjustments. The sky never stays silent forever. Years later, long after the war has ended, Mallory will struggle to explain what happened to those who ask. He will not talk about tactics or doctrine. He will talk about moments, about seeing intent before movement, about trusting instinct when there is no time to ask permission. But on this evening, in 1943, he says nothing at all. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the clouds in gold and red. The engines wind down. The airfield grows quiet. For now, the sky is silent.